Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
so thank you, ladies, and thank you, everybody who is here watching with us tonight. That was a very powerful and very rich documentary, and I'm so happy to see all of our viewers on the side that are so active in the chat and ready to share with us, because you all are a very sharing bunch. Let me go around and introduce us, who you're looking at right now. My name is Katrina Kehoe. I am the Vice President of Communications and Marketing at KLRN. It is my pleasure to get to arrange this event and to work with all of these women on the discussion that we're going to have tonight, and I'm really thrilled to be here. Let's go around, ladies, and let's introduce ourselves. Tammy, tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi there. My name is Tammy Logsdon. I'm the Program Director for the Children's Bereavement Center of South Texas.
Okay, thank you, Celeste. Tell us a little bit
Hi,
about you, my friend.
I'm Celeste Miller, and I'm the bereavement coordinator and counselor for Porter Loring Mortuaries, and we offer different grief support groups, and we'll be telling you about that in a little bit.
Okay, excellent. And Melissa, thank you so much for
Hi,
being here.
thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Melissa Williamson, and I'm actually here as a parent. I live in San Antonio, and I experienced the loss of my son at the age of 10 months old. And so the reason that I got involved in this process, I think one of the people were mentioning in the chat room about, what do you do with grief? What do you do with that anger? And you channel it for good. And so part of my role as an early educator in the San Antonio community is co-chairing the early care and education sector of the South Texas Trauma Consortium. And so I think that's part of that answer, is how I kind of channeled that anger. So thank you. It was a pleasure to be here. And I'm hoping that that was powerful. I have to say, it was powerful.
I could not agree more. And when we do screenings like this, many times I really try to make it my objective to try to watch it along with the audience, so I have that same first-time viewing experience. And I will say that it's never in anybody's best interest to go live on a chat after you've watched a documentary like that, because it really does trigger all of the emotions. And it really makes you think about a lot. And then the fact all the chat that was coming in on the side, it was so powerful. And so let's talk about some of that, because let's talk about some of the questions. And I was just madly taking notes while we were here. And let's go around and like let's talk about some of the questions that we had. Somebody talked about when something triggers in you, whether it's seeing that rusty truck, or hearing a song on the radio, or smelling a dish, or eating a dish that brings back memories. Like how do you pick yourself up in those moments and keep going when all you want to do is fall apart?
I think it's interesting that you asked that, and I actually wrote down that same thing. And I think it was Lisa that said something about the trigger, or Bernice actually said something about the trigger. And we don't often know what triggers are going to be for us, I don't think. And I just had my son has been gone for over 30 years now. And what the gentleman mentioned at the end of the film was that it's nothing that we'll ever get over. And I think that that people have to understand that. Yeah. And I appreciate when I hear it gets tolerable with time. And that's what I tell other grieving parents as well. But I recently had one of those triggers. We had planted, he's buried at Fort Sam Cemetery. And after he passed, we had planted a tree there. It was a crepe myrtle tree. And, we've taken care of that tree for 30 years. And I noticed, about a month ago when I went out there, a part of it was dying. And so I thought, well, I'm going to call the cemetery and see what I need to do, right? Just on his birthday, my husband and I went out to visit May 4th, shortly a couple of days thereafter, and the tree was gone. And boy, was that a trigger. Yes, it was interesting. My reaction, I didn't expect that. And so I think that what we have to understand about grief is that it does get tolerable with time. We don't always know what the triggers are, and it's not ever going to go away. We just have to learn to deal with it and how to funnel it differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Certainly. And Tammy, I mean, you work with children. How do you approach that?
I love what you just said, Melissa. And I would just like to, grief is connected to love. And so in the beginning, the loss of a love causes so much pain that the pain is really the thing that's the closest. With time, with support, the love comes back, and those memories, those triggers sometimes turn into the wonderful memories that we get to carry forward. So at the Children's Bereavement Center, we're working with young children. We're working with the whole family, but it's really important for caregivers when they can to get used to the idea of sharing their emotion, sharing the tears, letting a child know it's okay to feel this. Emotions are okay, and some emotions are hard. And so when you get to do that, you sit for a moment, the child gets to see you, get triggered, have tears, and then recover. What you're doing is you're modeling emotional regulation, and that's so helpful for kids. And your memories, depending on how old the child was when the loved one died, your memories may be the way that you keep that personal life for the child. So when you get to a point that you can reclaim the memories without the pain and begin to share that with children, it's a really neat way for them to then be included in grief and to be able to support good memories.
Yeah, that's great. And then so like wrapping that up, like Celeste, to you, a lot of people in the chat were talking about, what about when you're the one that holds the family together and you need to grieve too, right? And you're the one that everybody counts on to be the strong one. And then it just, you need to find that time and space too. You working in the field that you work in, there are people that you have to be present and responsible in order to get through a service or something, but at the same time balance the emotions of that and being able to pull something together. How do you work with people on that?
Well, I think what I've learned and what I think can help people is for that family rock, so to speak, to be able to, it's hard. It was like in the video, it said something about, I can't run to my parents. This was a teenager, when I know they're sad. And that's how people will say in group, I can't go to my spouse, or I can't go to the person closest to me because they're sad. And so this is, I think, when it's really helpful to have outside support, like support groups where they have peers who are experiencing the same kind of thing. Many times I have older women and older men's groups, and their children are there for them, but they know that they can't lean on their kids because their kids are also missing their parent. And so that's when it's really helpful to get some peer support or some outside support, because then they can, lean into each other. And many of my groups, when they come to group, and our groups are ongoing because we realize that grief doesn't end easily. It's like you said, Melissa, it goes on a lifetime. So you learn how to live with it, you learn how to deal with it. But then when you have some outside support, those gals and those guys, they go on to be forever friends. And it becomes another bond where you have a pillar to lean on besides the people that you think. In fact, most times the people who they think they're going to lean on are not the ones that they lean on.
Celeste, I couldn't agree with you more. It's interesting that you say that, because I was a young mom at that time. And this was after having experienced 2 miscarriages prior to him being born. And I didn't get that outside support. And I didn't feel like I could grieve in front of my friends and family. You know, my husband who had lost his first son,
Yeah,
right?
who was also tremendously sad.
Absolutely. And so I think that is, if I could go back and change anything, or if I could talk to Lisa, or if I could talk to anybody who mentioned, you know, what should I do? It is get that outside support.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it's true. So that's a great, that's perfect, because one of the people in the chat did write in and say, how do you know when to get how do you know when to get help? How do you know? And then that's why it's so important to have all three of you on this call today, is that not only how do you know when to get, but when do you get help? The gentleman in the film, he's talked about the economics of grief, and how, you know, the finances, especially when it's an adult or somebody who makes money and provides for the family, is the one who passes away. How can you realistically get help, and not, you know, what if the finances aren't there? So let's address a little bit of that. When do you get the help, or how do you recognize the help in yourself? And then how do you do that if you don't have the funds, with the funds to do something, you know, like a counseling session or group?
I think one of the first things is to know that it's okay to ask for help.
Right.
Like, one of the biggest factors in healing is the to know that vulnerability is really your go-to right now. Vulnerability meaning that I need, or it's okay, or I have permission to ask for help. And especially I have a younger women's group, and I see that it's almost the hardest for them to ask for help because they're used to helping everybody. They're helping their children, they're helping their parents, they're like in the sandwich place. They're working, and they're just not used to asking for help. And it becomes a huge relief when they realize that that's the right thing to do. And that's going to be the best thing they can do, is to ask for help. And then I always encourage them to look for those safe people, because not everybody is going to be that safe person. And in their vulnerability, they're too vulnerable to be with people who aren't safe. Like, that's just too hard. They're already stripped of everything. And so who are those safe people? And we spend sessions talking about who's safe and who isn't. Well, and kind of a litmus test that I always tell people is that those people who will hang around you, those people who will hug you, and then those people who hush, meaning they're not telling you what you need. And you kind of got to throw out a lifeline and see who those are. And again, it's usually somebody you didn't expect.
Yeah. You know, I think that's so true. One of the things that I'm seeing that Lisa asked the follow-on question with is about getting that help, right? It's about being a typical Hispanic family who she feels maybe she has to keep together because she's now the sister, and she's got brothers who are macho. And I'm going to have to tell you, with my own experience, you know, having a husband who at that time was in the military. And then, so, you know, 30 years ago, it was kind of taboo to seek support in the military. It's not like it is now, right, ladies?
Yeah.
And so when he retired from the military, getting out and becoming a licensed therapist, I will tell you, was just a phenomenal feat for him. And being able to help other males with these kinds of issues, you know, and understanding the grief and understanding, because I really think, and I think males sometimes handle grief differently from females. I have nothing to weigh that on except for personal experiences, but to really understand, you know, what goes on in each of those. And so I think that Lisa, in answering your question, is just encouraging and finding someone that they would relate to. I think that's the most important thing, particularly when you're finding someone to go out to seek support with. You know, I've it's somebody that's relatable to you and likable to you and helps you to understand things better. So I think that's important.
If I may, I'd like to join in on the question of how do I know if it's time to ask for help? Ask first. The Children's Bereavement Center has been in San Antonio serving grieving families, families with grieving children for 25 years, and we do not charge for our services. So you can get a consultation, and there are so many places in San Antonio where you can get free consultations. We believe that grief is natural, and you know what? Some families have the support that they need. If we were to meet with you with your child and say, you know what, really sounds like what's going on is in the very normal category. You've really got a lot of support. Here's an additional thing that we can offer. We're more than willing to do that. And grief is not a mental illness, but sometimes grief not treated or not attended to can lead to problems with anxiety or depression or other things. So come to a professional, let a professional get an assessment for you. Let us give you recommendations. Everyone who's on the screen and all the resources that you see, we're really good about meeting families and talking to caregivers and getting a real good sense about what individual members of the family need. Yeah. And if we can't do the whole thing, we're going to get you to the other person who can. We're going to partner together and offer services. So I would say the first question is to ask for help. Some people think, well, the death occurred years ago. Surely we should just be over it now. Particularly for children, that may not be true. Children grieve developmentally. So as they grow, their bodies grow, and they get taller, their minds are changing, and their understanding of grief and what happened is changing. And so very often getting the opportunity to work with a child and talk them through their grief experience and help them with language about it can happen even several years after the death experience. So ask for help. And I think we're all going to be willing to say, yeah, you're doing great. You've got this. You've got support from church, from family, from other places. You're well connected. Let us know if anything changes in the future, because grief doesn't end. It can get better. You know, it can get better, but sometimes it sneaks back up on you. And particularly with children, we know that developmentally, there's some milestones like the graduation between high school into college. There are a lot of lifetime moments that if a child has lost a parent or even a sibling, and they've moved farther in their life than the sibling ever got a chance to, sometimes these moments that are really supposed to be celebrated turn into something that's kind of difficult because the grief hasn't been dealt with yet. So let us help you determine if we can be of service or not.
That's excellent advice. Thank you, Tammy. That's wonderful. And that really ties in. Angela has asked a question now while you all were speaking. I think it's a really great question, because we can talk all day about how do we recognize when we need help, and then where do we go for that help, and how do we get ourselves better. But Angela is asking a question about what do you do when there's a member of your family who has passed away, and there's another member who, they have not looked for help, and they do not seek out the help, and they don't want to talk about the family member, and they don't accept help, and they don't probably even think that they need help. What do you do in the situation where there's somebody who's very clearly breaking, but they will not admit that it's happening?
So I'm going to say, and I was on a webinar earlier today that was talking about trauma and adverse experiences. And one of the things that they mentioned, and I heard again in parts of this video and not exactly the same words, but to be that safe person, to say, I'm here for you when you need help. I think and what she was saying earlier today was just being able to have somebody know that there's that sense of safety and security, so that when they're ready, they, like Celeste mentioned, they might know that you're the person that they can actually come to. I think that's really important because I will tell you that you may not feel, or the person who's grieving may not feel like they're in that safe environment, right?
Yeah.
To have someone to connect with. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. And to be that safe person to them, it means kind of accepting them right where they're at.
Yes.
And it's okay that you don't, and I think people ask me that question often in families. And I'll say, the point is you take care of yourself in grief, and it's going to have a ripple effect. And many times when a sibling or a parent or somebody comes to group and they go home and they start kind of living out some of the truths that they're learning, it ripples. And somebody else goes, hey, in fact, that happens often. Where can I go for help now? And this might have been a year, 2, 3 years later.
Right.
It often doesn't happen when we want it to happen for each other. But if we can be that safe person for them right where they're at, then it will happen in time, and we take care of ourselves.
That's great. And then Tammy, how do you address that with children?
Meaning that someone needs help and they're not asking for it.
Like a child, like you see a child that would need help and not ask for it, and they don't even know they need it.
With children, it's very much about, children are not always going to use their words, and they're not going to use avoidance. What children are going to do is they're going to show us sometimes through tantrums or increased anxiety or attention deficit. It's not attention deficit diagnosed, but attention seeking behaviors. Children are going to show us through their behaviors that something is wrong and they don't really know what it is. So the way that we work with that is just to first connect with the child, be a person that they know hears them, sees them, and is paying attention. We don't judge children, and we don't assume that we know what they need. What we do is work really hard to develop a relationship that feels natural. And sometimes that's fun. And very often that's sitting on the floor or with the teen, or sitting comfortably with the teen. But reconnecting as a safe person around areas that are not specifically grief related in the beginning is a way to gain trust and move children towards the place where they can identify emotions. Another thing that's really important with children is to help them with language around emotions. Help them know that sad is an okay emotion to talk about. Mad and angry. One of the individuals asked about anger. Grief is physical. It's not just crying. It is wanting to scream and hit and throw. And the truth is, one of the ways that we talk to children is it's okay to cry it out or sweat it out or what's the other one? I think I lost the other one. But anyway, the point is emotions need to get out. And if we can encourage children that no, emotions are bad, but what you do with emotions is really important. And this works actually for adults really well. Anger can be walked out. It can be ran out. It can be worked out through a garden. It can be, the emotion needs to be released. And when we get kids to the point that they can do that, then the regulation can come in. And the regulation is then how they get to the place to have words to talk to their caregiver or to another friend or to connect to another kid in support group. So I think it's really just about connecting with the individual first, like Melissa said, and Celeste said, be a good listener, be a safe person, be available without judgment and without preaching, without telling them how to feel, and just let them know that you're able to accept what they need to give, what they need to show you.
Great. And that ties right in, because as you were saying that, I mean, because that addresses, younger children and trying to get through the language and the understanding and everything. The questions are coming in now about teenagers. And we all know teenagers teenagers themselves, with or without grief. I mean, there's a lot going on there. I was one, I have one, and there's a lot. Those times are busy, right? But, somebody asks, what do you do about a teenager who is not accepting help? Because they could be almost to adulthood, so they comprehend a lot of what's going on already. Another person asked about a teenager who is grieving a marriage because of divorce. So that just reminds us that grief is in so many, there's so many different types of grief. It doesn't always have to do with death, but it has to do with, you know, a marriage that is no longer there, or parents that are no longer together. But so teenagers, how do we address teenagers? And all of you all can talk about that.
What I'll just lead and then one of the tough things about teens is that developmentally, they're at a space where they should be separating from their adults. They should be separating from the opinions of their parents. And that's when a third party individual can sometimes really be a way to offer an avenue, a safe place for that teen to explore their emotions without being, you know, without worrying about mom, without worrying about upsetting, you know, the caregiver. I love working with teens because they are just so darn honest, but sometimes they really need a lot of help with identifying feelings. And so you give them an awful lot of choices. You know, is it frustrated or is it angry? Is it bored or is it the other thing? And so lots of dialogue around feelings and emotions is sometimes the way that you unlock the grief component for them. But first they need to be heard as an individual and honored and validated for their experience, because their experience is valid, even if it's different from maybe another member of the family.
I really agree to the for teenagers and young adults, it can be really, really valuable to have an outside person or a third party, because they can't say all those things because it's either too scary or it feels too threatening to their caregivers, to their parents, but they will tell a third party. And, you know, sometimes when I'm working with young adults, if I hear from the parents, it feels like they're just really out there somewhere. And yet I know that the confidence that the child is sharing with me is they're going to be fine. They just need to have that separate space to say what they need to say, and they'll move through it.
Family members can be in very different places, even though they love each other and care about each other. Grief in a family is a moving and growing dynamic.
Yeah,
and sometimes, you know, sometimes at the center, we start with a child and then wind up working with an adult a little bit later. And sometimes different individuals are the ones who kind of need the help at the moment. Families who grieve together, some people in the family just pull back because other people's grief is so big that it kind of takes up all the oxygen in the room. And so some family members pull back and just stay in a quiet, supportive role. I love what Celeste said earlier, and Melissa too, about, you know, grief is with you for a really long time. So it's important to give it attention when it needs it. And for some people who are the pillar of the family, there was a question about Hispanic families. Whoever is the pillar of the family, which may be the mama, at some point, it should be mama's turn. It should be an opportunity for her to be the one who gets to sit and talk through her experience.
Yeah. I experienced that in my parents group, because so many of them, they have kids, they have family, they have jobs. So one night a week, they come and grieve. And that's their almost sacred time set apart just for them to be able to have a place and a space to acknowledge it, so that they can then go and be a parent to their living children. They have to honor who's not with them in order to be able to be present to who is there. And yet it feels hard to grieve that in front of their living children, because that is sibling rivalry too, you know.
No doubt. So, you know, I'd love to let's leave our viewers with just sort of the one final thoughts, or that, you know, what can they walk away with after this, knowing I want everybody that has watched this tonight to just feel empowered. Like, I want them to know, you know, where to go, how to respond, you know, and then they didn't get all the answers here today, but I just feel like if we point them all in the right direction, or give them those words of wisdom, the words of wisdom that I scribbled down during the show was, you know, that asking for help is not weak. It's not weak. And I think that we all need to remember that. a film like this does a great job of reminding us of that, because it's not a sign of weakness. And I loved what you said, Melissa, about back in the day when your husband was going through it, and it wasn't perceived as a strong, macho thing to do, to show weakness. And so I love that you addressed that. And one of the slogans that goes along with this film, it says, "Let's get better at grief." So I think as a community, the more we all understand it, and the more we all talk about it, and the more we all look at this as something that everybody goes through, we'll know how to handle those situations to where we don't feel like we're saying the wrong thing, and that sometimes saying nothing at all is the perfect thing to say. So those are my little anecdotes. And then we'll provide a link with some resources of all of these ladies' organizations and their contact information, so you can ask the question, Lisa, about Celeste's group. But anyway, why don't you go first, Celeste?
Well, I think a big takeaway and what I experience in the groups and when people come to group is to have a safe place to express whatever it is, whether it's, grief has such a range of emotions. And one of the things that was talked about here tonight was the secondary losses, all the losses that go with what everybody thinks is their main loss, and it is. But when you lose a spouse, for example, you often lose your sense of your role or your identity or the way the world worked. Or when you lose your child, you lose your purpose, because I was going to take care of that child. Not only did I lose my child, I'm losing my future in that child. And so you have to help, if we can create spaces where they can name those losses, just articulating them, and then their feelings around it, you start sorting through, and that just releases that. Plus it gives you a way to know what you need. What do I need now? And your assumptions about the world have to be reframed, you have to find meaning for what your life is like now. And that is layers of work, every aspect of you. And if you can have safe places to sort through that, and I think that's partly why we really like to offer specific loss groups, like loss of spouses for younger women and older women, because what they're going through is different, and loss of spouses for men, older men and younger men. And the men, many of them won't let their guard down anywhere else but with those guys who are going through the exact same thing. And it is such a freedom. And then parents too, the loss of a child. And yet we get other requests like this week, what about sibling loss? So, we don't address everything, but we do have 6-week life after loss classes too, where that's for any kind of loss. And so just to have spaces where grief can be verbalized and expressed, and then make a plan for, what do I need to take care of myself? And how can we get perspective, really with the goal of, how can I make my grief count? Like Melissa was saying, how can I make it count and live out? It's going to stay with you. So how can I live out of that legacy in a way that is purposeful and transformative and meaningful? And all of that is work. It is layers of work, and to have people and spaces where you can do that is absolutely invaluable for a healthy world and a healthy society. And if we can create that, then it makes a space where grief and the cycle of life is normal instead of isolated. And many people say it feels like we live in a subculture that nobody has ever talked about. And here I am.
Yes, very nice. And Tammy, I'd love for you to go next. Because with a question came in from a parent who, so I want to hear your thoughts and your final thoughts on all of this. But a parent asked if a child has gone through a program and seems to be doing okay, like a young child, 5-year-old, seems to be doing okay now, what can a parent do to make sure that being okay continues? Or at what point do you recognize and think that they might need something more?
Yeah, wouldn't it be marvelous if we could just, yeah, first of all, celebrate that they're okay. Celebrate that they're okay and know that that means that you're doing a good job of parenting, that they're connected to others, that they are able to find some meaningful ways to reconnect with other support systems. And you know, such an amazing thing to help kids learn to be able to love and trust the world again, because a death experience really wrecks a sense of security and everything. So if a child is doing well, celebrate it. What you might watch for is be sure that you're creating opportunities for the child to know we haven't, you know, let's just say a dad died. We haven't talked about dad for a long time, but I want you to know that it's okay. Keep the conversation open in two-way. It's not the same as making a child talk about, but just letting them go. I think about dad all the time, but I might not say to you that I'm thinking about dad. So, but I'm just letting you know it's okay. So keep the dialogue open and free. Let them know that you're able to talk, ready to talk when they want to. If a child is not doing well at one of those developmental stages, maybe it's elementary into middle school, maybe it's into high school. If they're not doing especially well, that might be a time that you reach out for more support. You know, give us a call. We will meet with the child and let you know this is within the realm of what's really, really normal at this age, or yeah, maybe we should really do a little bit of work. So reach out and ask. But if they're doing well, celebrate that. I think what I would like to leave as the takeaway is it is okay to say died. It is okay to talk about death. It is part of life. We should all get better at this. When we do, we're helping ourselves and we're helping the community because we're recognizing all the many people around us, you know, in the grocery line at HEB, all the many people around us who have had some of the same experience too. And we've really got a lot more support around us than we recognize if we learn to speak about it. And speaking about grief and having emotions is not weakness. It's really not. It's a great kind of strength. So, and if you don't feel like asking for help is the thing you want to do, ask for support, because asking for support also puts you in a position, and I know that Celeste and I share this from support groups, asking for support sometimes means, wow, you wind up meaning being the other mom across the room that connects to that mom and helps her recognize that, yes, it's really, really hard road and you're not alone. There are other people on this road together. You know, let's, you know, what can we do for each other? Mm-hmm. So I think that support might even be available in a lot of places, but we definitely at the center want the opportunity to help you assess and identify if this is something that needs, you know, another level of care, needs a little bit more. We have licensed counselors, we have trauma therapists. Let us help you get connected to that if that's what a child needs. And I guess the last thing, and excuse me, I forget to say this, our name is the Children's Bereavement Center, but we serve teens and young adults and caregivers, pretty much anyone, because you don't help a grieving child if you're not helping the family. So we really serve families.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful advice. That's great. Thank you. Thank you. It died is okay. That's wonderful. Melissa, your thoughts.
Wow. So following these two ladies, you know, I really echo everything that they said. I wish that, you know, it's 30 years later for me, right? And so it's taken a long time to actually say died. It's you know, it's taken a long time to acknowledge that. And I think my hope is that sharing my story as a parent and helping people understand how I channeled my grief for good, because I really think that's important. I think that, you know, there's lots of things that we can do with grief. And when you channel it for good, and Celeste mentioned, and I wrote down, I have 2 pages of notes about its layers of work. Well, this just didn't happen for me overnight. You know, I got involved slowly. And when I started speaking on trauma over the last couple of years, that's really when I felt like that, to me, I tell people all the time, that's my therapy. You know, when I can talk to people and I can share his picture and share my story, you know, that is the layers of work. And it's been a long time. And to acknowledge that it is definitely not a sign of weakness, and that we should be able to share. And I would love to connect with people. You can look me up on LinkedIn, and we can share stories together. But I think really the most important thing is to understand where you are in the process and be okay with that.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah. That's
lovely.
right. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you all. Like, thank you three for being here. I'm so happy that you were here and that you shared. I thought you all brought such valuable information to our discussion. And I know, I mean, the comments alone on the side, it really does make a difference. And I think talking about it and making this all okay is something that's what we're here to do. And so KLRN, I'm so proud of this program. I'm very proud that we're airing it and bringing these conversations out. And we're not forcing people to talk about them, but we're encouraging them. And we're just, if at nothing else, at the end of the day, if we make somebody feel like they're not alone, that it's not only them,
Absolutely.
and that there's other people just
Right.
like them that are experiencing it, then I feel like we've done our job. And I couldn't be more thankful that you were on this journey with us. So to everybody, to the viewers on, we are going to send out a link that has all of the resources of the organizations that these three ladies work with, as well as other resources that are available in our community. I'll include the contact information for them so you can ask direct questions if you do have them. And the program will air on Monday night at 10 o'clock on KLRN. And if you follow us on our social media pages, if there are other opportunities to highlight this program, if there's a way that we can watch it online, if ever we felt like we needed to do this again, even in a group setting, we certainly could. Because I feel like you just can't have this conversation enough. And I hope that every single person who watched with us tonight walks away telling somebody else about this show and sharing it, because there's so much power in sharing. So thank you all. Thank you again for being here, and thanks to our viewers for being here. And we'll see you all soon.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Bye-bye.
Hold on, ladies.